Welcome to the Ambient iPad. In this video, it's the Mellotron meets Bram Bos apps. On the Mellotron, I'll be using some classic sounds like the Mark II III violins, and I'll also use some choirs from the Mellotron M4000, as well as two Saxes. On the Bram Bos side, for percussion, it's Ruismaker, Ruismaker FM and Hammerhead. I'll also be using Troublemaker, which is kind of like a Roland 303 app for a bass line. And I'll also use Bram's Kosmonaut, which is kind of like a tap delay, and it has some reverb in there as well. And to trigger a lot of that, I'll be using his Rozeta suite. So I'll use Rozeta X0X, Rozeta Bassline, and Rozeta Rhythm. So I'll walk through all of that. I'll also be using the Roland Bos RE202 Space Echo as a delay and a space echo, but also for some looping. The signal chain is the Mellotron M4000D Mini. Its master mono analog output goes into a Boss volume pedal. The output from that goes into the Boss RE202 Space Echo. The stereo output from the Space Echo goes into a Universal Audio Volt 276 interface, which then goes into the iPad Pro. I'm using AUM. I have a number of Bram Bos apps set up as well, 3 drum apps, Ruismaker, Ruismaker FM and Hammerhead, and then Troublemaker for a bass line and some different effects as well. So let me walk through all of this, and I'll start with the Mellotron. So I've got Grand Finale set up just as a multi-effects end of chain, some compression, a little bit of EQ, and also to raise the volume a bit. Then Spatializer. For this jam, I'm using Spatializer a little more subtle than I typically would. But it's great for the Mellotron because it just kind of opens up the stereo field for what is essentially a mono instrument. And going through the Space Echo doesn't help much, even though it's a stereo effects pedal, it's not really adding a lot of stereo. You do get some with the reverb. So let me walk through the Mellotron sounds. I'll be using just a few different ones from the Mark II, the 3 violins. Let me start without the effects and then I'll add them in. So let's add in the Space Echo. And for a slight variation on that theme, we've got Bubbles from Audio Things. And then I'll be using 4-voice female choir. Let me turn off Bubbles. And here's the somewhat clean sound. Then with the Space Echo. And actually, we'll never be using the sound alone. I'll be layering it with the violins and kind of a little more over to the violin side. So here it is with the Space Echo, that layer. And then Bubbles for both of those. You can cut, there we go. Not sure I'll be using Bubbles for that. And let's move over to, so that's the M400 4-voice female choir. And also from the M400, I'll be using, for a solo voice, 2 Saxes. Here's what it sounds like with no effects. Let's add in Space Echo. I've got the reverb turned down because it sounds reverby enough. If I turn it up, this is what you get. Not bad, just not what I'm looking for. And then finally, we've got Mixed Custom Choir on the M400 without effects. Let's add in the Space Echo. We can get a little more reverb with this. Turn that off, and this is what it sounds like with Bubbles. Some cool sounds. Let's move over to the Bram Bos apps. Let's start with Ruismaker. So I created a drum patch, and I'm triggering this from More Bram Bos apps, the Rozeta suite. This is Rozeta X0X. For effects, let's turn them off here. So I'm using Kosmonaut from Bram Bos. You can hear that bouncing delay. That's what I call this patch. I got a little, actually on this one, there's no reverb because I'm using EOS from Audio Damage. Let me turn that on. Just adds a little ambience. I mean, I've got 20% here on the wet dry mix, just to give it a little breathing room. Let's turn that off and move over to Ruismaker FM. Again, created a drum patch here, and this one is triggered by Rozeta Rhythm. And for effects, let's turn them off. So for the delay, kind of generalized spatial stuff, got K7D, very basic tape delay I've created. And then for reverb, room reverb from Elephant DSP. Again, just a little bit of ambience there. And finally, Hammerhead, which has its own built-in sequencer. So I created this drum patch and this drum line, but I have mutation set up a bit just so there's some randomness. For effects, turn that off. We've got Spatializer, just a teeny bit of kind of reverb there, metallic, and then Kajita. This is a combination delay reverb. Again, all these apps on the drums are really subtle. So what do they sound like when they're all together? So I like working with multiple drum applications, and I treat them individually and then as the group. So I could really just use one app, I'm sure, to create all this, but I like the different timbres, the different flavors of drum sounds that you can get from multiple apps. And if that wasn't enough, we're also using Troublemaker from Bram Bos, which is kind of a 303 app. Let me turn all the drums off. And this is being triggered by Rozeta Bassline. I have this set up as a G-sharp major pentatonic scale. It's a fancy way of saying we'll just be using black keys for the most part for this jam. So there's two versions of Troublemaker that you get when you purchase it, kind of the regular one and what's called modded. I'm not really using the modded features, so I must have just hit this one, but really good sound. And no effects. And then another instance of my bouncing delay in Kosmonaut. I do have the ambience set up a teeny bit more than on Ruismaker because it's a bass line, not a drum line, but very subtle. It's easy to get overpowering with the ambience feature on this app. Let's get everything going, and let's do a little soloing with two Saxes. Turn that reverb down. And I think at some point in the jam, I'll start using the Space Echo as a sound-on-sound looper. I've done a ton of different videos on how to do that because you can get 6 seconds of delay out of this. And what I would do is probably, let's get rid of one of these drums. And let's just get this going. Quick loop. And while I'm building that loop, maybe we kind of fade out some of this. Let's get Troublemaker down here. And then we'll just get rid of the drums one at a time. Alright, that's enough with the loop. And then we could kind of fade out Ruismaker. do some soloing on the outro. Let's just keep it on the violins. Now what I'd really like to do here is use bubbles for this solo, but I can't, because if I turn it on, it applies it to the loop, which I don't want to do. So instead, because Tails is on the Space Echo, I'll just go to the next memory slot, which is actually manual. Let's turn that off. So what manual means is that you get whatever setting the knobs are at. So let me just, everything here is fine. This is just a quick demo anyways. Turn this on, and then we can do some soloing while that loop's fading. So there you go, just a quick walkthrough of everything and a demonstration of the sounds. Let me reset everything back to where I need it to be for the start, and I'll do a jam. I'm still enjoying using the Space Echo as a sound-on-sound looper, but this video is really about integrating the Mellotron into that iPad app ecosystem. I chose the Bram Bos apps because they sound great, and all his apps are rock solid. From the percussion apps to Troublemaker for the bassline, and especially Rozeta, that whole suite to trigger all those apps. What I really like about the Rozeta suite is there's a lot of randomness or mutation you can add in there so that there's just, you can create these drum lines and then you can make them even more organic by using that setting and just have them randomly change over time. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.